Hey class, so today we will be going over custom families. So families in Revit are kind of the detail. They get into any type of component, any type of furniture or equipment or aesthetic detail which isn't found in the basic Revit elements. And we'll go over how to create those, the parameters that you can set for the families, as well as how to integrate those families within pre-existing Revit elements. So let's open our template. Oops. All right. So excuse me. All right. So a typical Revit family is going to be found under the Architecture tab under Component. So place a component is essentially place a family, and there's some different types of families that won't show up under Component, but the majority of them will be found here. This is where you'll find all of your furniture, any specific like lighting elements, toilets, for example. So I'm just gonna pick a desk for right now and place it and hit escape. And so it comes in, and this specific element is three-dimensional, and typically your components will be three-dimensional. And as you can see, it's a nice fully detailed desk. And underneath the desk, there are a couple different options, different sizes. Those are all preset, but you can change and edit those depending on what you need. So if I change to 72 by 36, it's going to grow to 72 by 36. And if we go into the edit type under properties, you'll be able to see that there are a series of parameters that you can manipulate to start to change that, right? So right now it's set at 72 inches by 36, so depth is 3 feet and the width is 6 feet. We can change that hit OK, and that will change. Okay, it is not specified by the name, it's specified by the parameters. So if we were to do that, right, obviously 72 by 36 is not an adequate name for it anymore. So we can either change it to 84 by 48, or we could just say large desk. Typically, if I'm still trying to adjust the dimensions of a specific family, I'll just put in a generic name just so I don't have to continuously change the dimension name as I go, as I edit. All right, so that's pretty basic, and that's pretty typical along all families. You'll have your basic type parameters and then instance parameters that will show up under your properties. Okay, now if I wanted to go in and edit a family, up here at the top under Modify Furniture, it'll say Edit Family. That will open up the specific file for this family, completely separate from the project file. And then we can go in and start to edit the specific geometries that make up this family. All of them are just made up by typical generic models, extrusions, blends, your typical solid form generation that you find in the conceptual massing environment or the generic model environment. And then if we open up, so right now we're in a 3D view, so if we open up a floor plan, now we get to see where all those parameters come in and how they're formed, right? So we went over this a little bit last class in the custom pattern-based, curtain wall pattern-based families, where we were creating the parameters from dimensions. So right now, if we go in, here's our width, that's how, and the depth. That's how, if we go into the type parameters, they show up width is 5 feet. If we change that here, oops, not 67 feet. If we change that here, it will then update. And you can see that they use reference lines, or excuse me, reference planes as ways to keep the elements in plane and in line with each other. So these desk drawers are all associated with this center line, and since this center line is specified at 8 inches from this far right reference plane, when the width changes, which is tied to those reference planes, when the width changes, this reference plane moves with that one, maintains its 8 inches, and since that desk drawer is locked to this reference plane, it also shifts. So a little bit getting into the weeds. We'll go over it a little bit further when we start to develop it, but I just wanted to cover how that works. And if we go to a front view, we can see there's even more. So height, leg height, we can manipulate all of these. Okay, so that's just going over the basics of families and how to edit them. You can edit any family if you get it off of Revit City is a really good library for custom families, furniture families. Furniture websites are really good. Any architectural fixture or element, typically the manufacturer will have a Revit or 3D CAD version for you to be able to utilize. So that's basic. We'll delete this desk for right now. Right now I'm back in the project file. And we are just going to go over how to create a custom family. So to place an already loaded in family, we do place a component. If we want to generate a custom one, we can either do model in place, which we've done before, or we can go to File, New, and then hit Family. And that will open up a whole library of different types of families that we can create. Okay, so right now, let's just do a generic model. And under generic model, there are a significant amount of special types. So you can do face-based, which will place that family along any type of face, wall face, floor face, anything like that. Roof-based, it'll snap to any roof. Wall-based, just be careful. Like especially, if you do floor-based, just know that you will not be able to place that family on a roof. It has to be hosted to a floor. So if you want it to be pretty flexible, just hit the basic generic model family, hit open. It's going to open this. We're in the floor plan, and you have your two center lines. This designates the center of that family, and when you place it, that's where your mouse will be, is right at the center. We're just going to create a really basic rectangular column, and we're going to put some parameters on there. So let's just go up to extrusion right now. Just drag a rectangle, doesn't matter the size, and hit check. Okay, so we'll do a couple different things. So I don't think I've shown you this right now. But if you do 2 dimensions in a dimension line, which is when you have more than one in one plane, if you click the dimension, there's a little EQ that stands for equal. If you hit that, that's going to equal out the 2 dimensions and make them equal to each other. And what that does is if I drag this face out, it's going to do the same thing to that to make sure that these 2 dimensions remain equal. And one way that's really helpful is if we do an overall dimension between the 2, and we make this a parameter. So remember, we click on the dimension, we go up to the label, and this button right here, create parameter. We can call this width. Let's make that a type for right now. Press OK. And now if we go into the type parameters and change the width to, let's say, 2 feet. Now, when that shrinks, it shrinks equally on both sides and make sure that it stays centered on that center line, that center reference plane. So let's do the same thing. Well, let's not do the same thing. Let's actually do 2 custom parameters for back and front. Here, and I'll put them on different sides. Okay, so let's create a parameters. Let's call this depth 1. I don't know, depth 1, and call this one depth 2. Now, when we place this, we can then manipulate the depths on either side. So let's say it's in the plane of a wall, and we only want it to stick out from the plane of the wall 6 inches on this side, but a foot on this side. We can then go and manipulate those 2 depths to reflect that. Okay? And then 2 other parameters that we can do really quickly. So if we go into the front elevation, so we have our reference level, that will be wherever we place it. So if we're in a level 2 plan and we place this component, it's going to be referenced to level 2. Now we can change the height, and we could do that 2 ways. We can either do a typical dimension and change the parameter like we've been doing, or we can actually go in, since this is an extrusion, and over on the right you have an extrusion end and an extrusion start point. Now, since we created this extrusion in the reference level, it starts at the reference level, and the start is at 0, 0, so it's going to be in plane with the reference level. And then we can edit the extrusion end. If we do that right now, you see that it starts to get manipulated. If you go to this little gray square, associate family parameter, we can actually associate a height parameter to that. So it'll bring up all the parameters that we have within the file, the family. And we can actually, if we wanted it, let's say if we wanted the height to be the same distance as the depth, we can actually put that in there and tie it to 2 different dimensions. And when we go to manipulate the width, let's say we make that 4, then it will change the height and the width to 4 since we associated that. But let's keep that separate for right now. So let's go back. And now instead of hitting width or depth or anything like that, down at the bottom left there's a new parameter tab. If we click that and type in height. And for right now, let's do an instance parameter. Press OK. Press OK. Now, excuse me, if we go in here, that extrusion end now is grayed out because it is associated with a parameter. We cannot manipulate it here. We have to go into the type parameter and editor and edit it here. Okay? So, just like all the others, if we type it in here, get in there. Alright, now we can save this, call it column. Make sure that it changes it up here, and then we've gone over this before, but load into project or load into project and close. One will just load it into the project and keep it open within Revit. The other one will actually close out the file. So let's load into project and close for right now. We can place this anywhere. So let's just place it right there. And as you can see, if we go and place it again, the mouse is in the center line. So where those 2 center planes intersect, that's where our mouse is going to be. Our width is centered, and our depth is offset, that's 6 inches and 1 foot. So if we go in here, let's go to 3D and click it. So our height, which is an instance parameter, is now populating in our individual properties tab, or instance parameter tab, and we can change that here. And then if we go into edit type, all of our different parameters come in there. So if we change this to 2 feet instead of 6 inches, change that to 4 feet, We press OK, it will now grow. Okay, so that's a really basic introduction to families. We're going to go in and create a kind of like an entire building, just manipulating different families. So to start off, let's go to massing and site, do an in-place mass. That's okay. All right, and then go to level 1, and let's create 2 reference planes. One reference plane will be the start of our building, and then let's see, let's call this front, and then copy that. That's fine, and then change the name to back. Alright, so now we have 2 reference planes. One is called back, one is called front. One will be the front face of our plane or our building, one will be the back. Okay? So let's go to a 3D view. Now if we hit zoom to fit, will be everything in that view will be shown, fit within the screen. Alright, and then before we start drawing, let's hit the set for set work plane. It defaults to level 1. Let's go to reference plane front. Then go to a true elevation on our 3D box. Let's just draw, see that's where our plane is. Let's just draw a 3-sided box. And then let's draw a spline along the top. Nice double curved. Let's make that a little bit more extreme. Remember, to be able to highlight that one individual line, gotta tab over. Alright. Hover over it. It is one solid line. Alright, so let's create the back face. Let's go set work plane, change that from reference plane front to reference plane back. Go back to front view, and right now we can just draw the same 3 straight sides, and then we'll create a new spline. So let's just do the inverse. Let's just manipulate that a little bit further. So it's real funky. Okay, now we have 2 lines. And you know, I don't really like the proportion of that. So let's go to level 1. And the nice thing about the reference planes is all you have to do to be able to highlight it, hit filter, uncheck the lines, just select the reference planes. So the nice thing about reference planes is that everything associated with it will move when you move the reference plane. So instead of having to highlight everything and move that, all you have to do is select the reference plane, move that back. So now we have a little bit nicer of a proportion. And now if we select the 2 curves, hit create form, it will create a loft between the 2, a nice double curved roof. If we go to shaded, see that a little bit better. Not that much better, but a little bit better. Alright, so, excuse me. So, let's finish mass, and let's go into level 1, and I want to show you something. Let's move this to the center of our elevations. I want to show you something that we haven't covered yet. Under the architecture tab at the far right is a grid. Those allow you to place structural grids. And if we click, drag, and click again, that will place a grid. And because of my OCD, I'm going to change the head from the bottom, which you do by unchecking this bubble, and then going up to the top, checking it. That will create the head at the top. Alright, and then if we copy this over, let's do one at here, actually. Let's do one at the center line. So hit the intersection and then hit that. And then let's mirror this one So we have a nice, clean, equally spaced grid. Okay, so those are our vertical grids. Let's do some horizontals. Let's do the same thing. Let's copy this guy down to the center line, and then let's mirror this guy over that. Alright, now typically your grids will be spaced a little bit further or closer, depending. But the nice thing about this is you can associate structural columns to the grids and then change that, and you can associate structural beams to that as well. So all you have to do is adjust the column grid, and they will manipulate and transform to fit those new grids. Excuse me. Okay, so let's make the first thing that we create a structural grid. So if we go to File, New, Family, there is a template for structural columns. So let's click that, press Open. So one thing I didn't mention before, so under all of those different types of families that you can create, typically they'll have a template associated with it that will have different elements in there that are associated with the specific type of family that you're trying to create. So like a curtain wall panel, that's going to actually have a note that says which side is the exterior and which side is the interior. For this column, you have an upper and lower reference level, because for a column you're going to need an upper and lower reference level. And then they also lay out some already predetermined reference planes. Now you don't need to keep that. You can delete those if you want. They just help you, since primarily a structural grid is, or a structural column is going to be associated equidistant from the center point. So they want to set you up to help. So let's use those. So let's create an extrusion. Let's create a rectangular extrusion, and let's actually model it inside the reference planes for right now. Hit yes. And this is how you lock your any different element to a reference plane. So if we go up to the Modify tab and hit Align, you hit the reference plane and then hit the extrusion face. When you do that, it not only aligns the reference plane to, or excuse me, the extrusion to the reference plane, but it also populates this little padlock. If you hit that, now it's saying that this face is locked to this reference plane and vice versa. So let's do that for the remainder of the reference planes and faces. Okay, and then let's do that for the front. So if we go into our front elevation, let's lock the top of this extrusion to the upper reference plane. Hit check. Alright, let's go up to our family types right now. So we don't actually have a width or a height or anything pre-loaded in here. We just have the reference planes. So if we go to here, I don't know if you can create, no. Yeah, let's go to lower reference plane. Let's do real quick width and depth. Create parameters. So select the dimension, hit the create parameter tab. Let's do this one as width, this one as depth. Alright, and then let's do height. So since we have a double curved roof at the moment, the heights of our columns are going to shift pretty significantly from the different points. So let's do a height, dimension the two levels, and then create a parameter for height, and this automatically goes to instance. So let's just hit OK, and then let's just make sure that height. Actually, so the upper reference level may already be preloaded into the instance parameters. So let's save this family real quick. Let's save as structural column. Press OK. Let's load into project. Let's not load in project and close, but just load into project for right now. Let's click that. Okay. So right now it's disappeared. Now that could be one of two things. That could be because structural columns aren't allowed in the viewport, or maybe because it is below or inside the reference level, level 1. So let's go to a 3D view and see where that got populated. And yes, it is underneath. So let's click that guy and see what's going on. Yeah, so right now, instead, because the top level and base level are the same, so let's change that top level to roof, level 2. Change the base offset from -9 to 0. Now it is populating within, and let's change that to level 2. Now, right here it's sticking through. We can go into top offset and hit estimate -1. It'll lower down and come into plane. Let's go back to level 1. All right, so since this is a structural column, let's delete the one that we placed before. And let's go back into structure column. Our new structural column will appear here. And then you can place this wherever you want, but if you want it tied to the structural grids, at the top under place structural column, you can actually do at grids. So if you hit at grids and then select all of the grids, anytime those grids intersect, it's going to place a column, and it's going to use the center line of that column to place at the center line of those intersections. So hit finish. And of course, none populate in the level because it's going to default to that -9 feet. Select all of them. Let's change that again to roof, 0, and we're good. All right, so now we have structural columns tied to the grids. If we change these grids, it's going to shift the columns around. And we can go in and adjust these columns right now to any different height that they need to accommodate based on the double curved roof. Okay, let's keep that. Actually, let's do this. So there's another tool that you can use. It's pretty, and I don't know if it'll work for the double curve, so we'll just try this out right now. So if we do roof by face, let's do just a generic 12-inch, and click that guy, create roof, and then attach top and base. I will. Awesome. So if you have a really complex roof like this, or well, you won't have a complex floor because floors should always be horizontal. But if you have a complex roof like this and you have a bunch of different structural columns, instead of having to go in and adjust those heights, you can click the roof, or excuse me, you can click the columns. So let's select all and then filter out the mass. Press OK. Up here at the top under columns, and this is for columns, for walls. Yeah, I think that's it. Columns and walls. You can do attach top or base to a specific element, or detach. So if we do attach top and base and click the roof, that will adjust all the different columns to different heights. Okay? Okay. Now, if we delete that guy, okay, all those stay the same. Because we're going to do a little bit more of a complex panelized roof system for this element. But for right now, we have, let's do curtain wall. So let's do place wall, wall by face. Go down to curtain wall, and then click our two rectilinear faces. And then press enter. Excuse me, escape out. So right now, the family type curtain wall doesn't have any grids associated with it, any grid spacing. So let's change that. Let's change curtain panel. Actually, let's keep that none for right now. Let's do a fixed number for the vertical grid and a fixed number for the horizontal grid. And then let's just do 2.5 by 5 for the interior. Whoa. 2.5 by 5 for the interior of the horizontals. And press OK. Alright. So now remember, when we do fixed number, those numbers that we can manipulate are at the instance parameter under properties. We can change that. And make sure you don't put any units in there. And it will change that specific wall into a different spacing. So let's go in and manipulate this guy. So there's two different elements within the curtain wall that you can manipulate. One is the curtain panel, one is the mullion. And the mullion, so you can use, we've gone over this, how to create vertical fins before, and reveals, if I can select the damn thing. And that's fine. And you can do that. You can use the rectilinear mullion to then duplicate and create new rectilinear formed mullions from that, and use the different parameters, the thickness and the width. But you can also create a completely custom mullion by creating a new profile. And profiles are the basis for mullions. So they, excuse me. So they, what was I saying? Yeah, so they're the basis of mullions. So you can create them in any different shape that you want. They don't have to be rectilinear. They just default to rectilinear because those are your typical standard mullions. So let us create a new mullion pattern. And I have to pause this real quick. Okay, sorry about that. So let's create a custom mullion. Go to File, New, Family. And then you can do one of two things. Actually, just kidding. Let's go. Can you do a mullion? Oh yeah, sorry. So you can create just a basic profile, or you can create a profile for a mullion. So let's do that. Profile mullion. Press OK. And then, like I said, some families have real specific kind of instructions based on them. So we have the interior side, the center of the mullion, the exterior face, and then yeah, so curtain panels. So if you have like a glass panel here, wherever the outside face of the mullion is, it's going to stop where it intersects that. So that's just something to keep in mind. So since profile is only based around lines, all it gives you for your drawing is a line tool. And then let's do a funky one. Let's do an ellipse. Never done one before, but it should be kind of cool. Alright, and that's literally all you have to do. Now you can get real funky with it, you can get really faceted or whatnot, but all you have to do is draw a 2D line, and that is your profile. So let's save this. Mullion profile. Load into project and close. project 1, okay, and then go to our 3D view, and then let's create a new profile, or mullion, excuse me. So let's go to edit type. Oh shoot. Let's go to mullion. So under architecture tab, you also have current wall mullion. Go to edit type. Let's duplicate this and let's call this an ellipse mullion. And then down under profile, let's change this from rectangular, excuse me, to mullion profile, which is what we named it. So mullion profile, and then so none of the different parameters change, but we can still change the material. We can still change the offset from the center line of the curtain wall, and we can also change the angle. So let's just hit OK. And now let's go back into our curtain wall type, edit type, and then go down and let's change this back from 2.5 to ellipse. Press OK. Now we have our ellipse mullions. Okay. And of course we can edit. So if we go back into here, let's open. If you still have that open, let's go to mullion profile, open that back up. So we can put parameters on here just like we can on anything else. So if we hit that dimension, make that permanent, drag that guy out, and then go and create a parameter under create parameter. Depth. Press OK. Now we can load that back into the project. Always overwrite the existing. And then if we go into that mullion, edit type, now our depth will. Why did that not change? Should have changed. Give me one moment. Let's do try shared print. No, just kidding. Alright, I will look that up because I know you may have to, since it's the profile, so since you're creating a parameter in the profile, I guess it doesn't automatically transfer to the mullion that you're associating that profile to. So I will look that up. Give me 1 second, actually. I can look that up really quick. Okay, not quite sure. I guess with custom profiles, you cannot transfer parameters in to the mullion. So you'll have to create different sized families for different type or different size mullions that you want to create. Which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. So now we've done that, let's create a custom panel. So let's go to File, New, Family, and then Curtain Wall Panel. Hit Open. And now we are saying, so this is the center line of the wall. This is the center line of the panel, and then this is the outside of the panel. This is the inside. And what we will do, so instead of creating just a generic rectilinear extrusion, let's make a corrugated extrusion. And let's do that by going to our right elevation, go to Create, go to Extrusion, and then, extrusion, and let's just do a couple jogs in and out. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be equal. Okay. Now, before we hit that check, let's go to the dimension. And let's just dimension each one of these loops. Each one of these lines. Actually, make sure that you hit the profile line and not the reference line. I might be eating those words in a second, but for right now, let's go that way. All right, and then hit that EQ, make those all equal, and now hit check. Now all those will be equal. If we go back in and edit the extrusion, all those equals will still be there. So we can edit those. So those dimensions stay within the profile of the line. And then let's do this to make sure that our extrusion is snapped to the exterior, the reference level and the top of the curtain wall grid. Hit lock. Let's go to the front face, so the exterior. Alright, and you can see it started over here, but it has to go across, so let's lock those as well. Yes. Yes. Okay, so now we have a pretty basic corrugated profile. Let's save this. Corrugated panel, that's okay. Alright, load into project 1. Let's go back to our 3D view and then go into our curtain wall family, edit type, and in our curtain panel, let's change that down to system panel. Where is it? There it is, corrugated panel. Okay. And okay, so either our I drew it backwards and drew the exterior or the corrugations to the interior, or our curtain wall is facing the wrong way. So to change the direction of the wall, and this is with any wall, all you have to do is hit space and it will flip the wall to the other side. Let's do that for the other one. Oops. Alright, perfect. So now we have, and let's not judge the aesthetics too hard, but we have a corrugated panel with some custom ellipse profile mullions and a custom structural grid. So I have to pause this real quick and then we'll get into the... Alright, getting back to it. So the last thing that we're going to do on this specific project is create a divide surface on this top roof. So remember, to do that, we have to go in and edit the mask. So edit in place, tab through to select the specific face that you want to divide, our double curved roof. And at the top, hit that divide surface button. And we now have a divided surface. So let's go in and let's just do rhomboid. Okay, and then let's change it. So remember that the divide surface, it breaks down just like a curtain wall that has a fixed number grids. On the right, underneath the properties, you have 2 numbers in your U and V grid layout. It's just like your horizontal and vertical, but since divide surface doesn't have any sort of orientation associated with it. They just they go to a U and V grid. So let's change that. I believe this was a 4, so let's change this to 4. Okay, so that's doing it. Let's try 5. There we go. It's kind of like lining up. Let's double it, make it 10, so that the intersections actually hit the mullions on both sides. And then let's get this center line. It may not work, so we'll leave it as it is. All right, so our grid is 10 and 12. And then remember that we have to create a specific family for this type of system. So go to File, New, Family, and then go to Current Panel, Pattern Based. Hit Open. All right, and then we selected the rhomboid pattern, so we need to click our pattern, change it to rhomboid, and now we have it set up. So for this specific pattern, or our grid system, we'll do a rectilinear mullion or substructure, and then instead of doing just a regular panel, let's offset this panel in the center, and let's make that parametric, so we can change the sizing of the panel within the family. Now, I haven't mentioned this yet, but these parameters, specifically instance parameters, they're going to come into, they're going to become very important when we start to create parametric modeling within Dynamo. Those are the types of inputs that we use through Revit to be able to create gradients or adapt certain components to solar orientation or etc. Anything where we would be creating some sort of parametric modeling within Grasshopper and change, let's say, the radius of a circle or the grid layout. It's that kind of parameters. That's what we use within Dynamo. So have that in the back of your mind while you're setting this up, because these will become important when we move into the Dynamo portion of the semester. So first, let's create a mullion. So like we did before with the circle, we'll use the point element and put that on the grid. And then now we have a plane that is perpendicular with the boundary of the rhomboid. So we'll set our drawing to that specific reference point and then draw a rectangle around it. Okay. Now we could just do our typical create form and create a rectangle around it, but let's make it a little bit more parametric. So we'll do our dimension, and let me change the scale down at the bottom left, so it's a little bit easier to read these dimensions. Alright, and let's make this dimension equal so that it's equidistant from the center line of the boundary, and then let's put another dimension on this and create a parameter for the thickness. So up at the top, hit that create parameter button, type in thickness, press OK, and then do the same thing for the depth. Create parameter, depth. Actually, we should probably specify mullion depth, since there will be a depth of a panel. Let's go into our family types. Let's change the thickness. Edit parameter. Let's just change the name of it to mullion so we don't get confused. And then let's just change those to nice numbers. So 1 foot, and let's do 4 inches for thickness. Press OK. All right. Now we have control over the dimensions of our mullion. And then to create that form around the perimeter, we select the profile of the mullion and the boundary line of the grid, hit create form, and now it has created a frame around that rhomboid. Now, let's create our panel, and let's temporarily hide the mullion for right now, so we have a clean drawing space to work with. So down here, there's those little glasses, hit isolate element. And we have the wrong thing selected, so let's try that again. Okay, so now remember, if we want to just create a panel around this boundary, all we would have to do is create form. We could select either the plane or the extrusion and be on our way. But we want to create this panel so that it offsets from the boundary, and we can control the dimension of that offset. So we can essentially choose the sizing of the panel within that frame. So to do that, let's do select, what is this, select similar, or pick lines. Pick lines. Oops. And remember, we have the drawing set on the point plane. So let's set that to here, I'll do it again. Each one of these lines, reference planes, has 2 planes. So if you can't select the one, just remember to tab through and you select the other one. So select one that is horizontal with the panel, and then go through and select each one of these guys. Alright, and now let's offset that curve inside. And we do not want to copy this. We want to actually take this rectangle and offset it without making a copy. So up at the top left, you can specify the distance that you offset it. And you can also uncheck this copy box, and it will not make a copy of the line. It will actually just move the line itself. So let's offset that in. And then we can set up dimensions that tie each one of these curves to the reference plane. And then all we got to do is create one parameter for one of these dimensions. Let's just call it offset, or panel offset. And let's make this an instance parameter, since we will need to do that if we want to make this parametric in the future. So instead of having to create 4 different parameters, now all we have to do is select each one of the dimensions, and instead of going to create parameter, we just drop down this from the label, select the parameter that we want it to be locked to. And now, when we go into family types and change the panel offset, all of them will offset the same distance. And now we can use this rectangle to create a panel. And just like we had before, select that dimension tab to make it permanent. Pull it off, create a parameter, panel depth. Let's keep that type. That's okay. Go in there. Let's change that to 1 inch. Press all right. Okay. Now if we unhide, I have a panel, a boundary frame, and we should be good to insert that back into the file. So let's go and save this to our folder, call it rhomboid panel, then load into the project. Project 1, press OK. Alright, and then select the divide surface pattern, go down to rhomboid pattern, and wait. And it can't make it awesome. Well, that's fun. Okay, well, let me figure this out and what I screwed up, and I will come right back. Okay, so I do remember how to do it. It's a little bit more in depth and complex, and honestly, probably deserves its own separate video, which may be an upcoming assignment. Yet to decide that, but for right now, you have to offset to do the offset panel within it. It has to be tied to the boundary, and it just doesn't work. So for today, we'll just do an offset. I'll show you something different than what I was planning. So let's hide that mullion again, like we were going to. Create a panel, make sure it has an extrusion, and then we're going to pull off this panel depth again, just like we did. Create a parameter from it, panel depth, but for this time let's do panel depth 1. Very sneaky. Let's do instance. And let's do this. Click reporting. Actually, no, just kidding. Just hit instance for right now. Figuring this out as we go. All right, and then let's select the bottom panel and pull this up. And then we'll create another dimension. Here. Of course, this isn't going to cooperate. No. One second. Got it. Okay. So I was trying to do stuff that won't allow me to do. So make sure that your mullion is hidden. Let's create a form from the boundary line. Hit that extrusion button. All right. So instead of pulling out a dimension from here, what we will actually use is the positive and negative offset that is allowed from this extrusion. So what this does is the negative offset, if you type in 5 feet, it's going to go down 5 feet. It goes negative away, if that makes sense. So if we typed in, let's say, negative 5 feet, it's going to go the opposite way and go in or towards the outside of the panel. So to make this parametric, we're going to use some formulas that you can integrate within the Revit family-based system. So if we click this guy and we create a negative offset, let's set that as the panel depth, and then for the positive offset, let's do panel depth 1, depth 1. hit instance, press OK, press OK again. Alright, now both of those are tied to different parameters. Now, to make it parametric, all we will do is go into our type parameter manager, and under panel depth, or excuse me, panel depth 1, let's change this. Let's make sure it's okay. So that's an instance parameter, and this is an instance parameter. Okay, good. All right, so panel depth will have 1 inch, and then panel depth 1. On the right side next to the value, there is a formula tab, and here you can type in different formulas. So let's say we could do panel depth +1, so it's 2 inches. We could do mullion depth +1, and it will be 1 foot 1 inch. But let's say, so we want this to offset and maintain a thickness. So we'll have panel depth be the thickness. Yeah, the thickness, and or no, panel depth be up. We'll figure it out. So, but essentially, what we need to do, since panel depth 1 is the positive and panel depth is the negative, we gotta negate the other choice. So let's do it this way. Alright, I know this is very messed up. It's kind of late at night, so my brain isn't really working very well. Make this really clear. Alright, let's change this name to offset. So the way we do formulas, if we want to reference another parameter, we have to type that in exactly how it shows up. So do a negative or minus sign, because we need to negate the value of panel depth since it's the negative offset, and if we have it as a positive, it'll just go the opposite way that we want. So we'll make it negative and then put in parentheses offset, and then plus whatever we want the panel depth to be. So let's say plus ½ an inch, close the parentheses. Now if we click off of that, now we've changed it, and now it is the offset, which is 8 feet plus ½ an inch, so 8 feet and ½ an inch, and then we've negated that, so it's negative 8 feet and ½ inch. If we press OK, now we have a panel that is ½ an inch thick and offset from the face 8 feet. Now let's go in and make that a little bit less. Let's make it 2 feet. Now all we have to do is change one parameter, and it automatically calculates the other parameter to maintain the thickness that we wanted. So let's reset this guy. Let's save it, and let's load this back into the project. That's okay. Pray to God it works. So pattern-based families, well, it disappeared, which I think is a bug in the system, because that was happening on a lot of our other Are we still in the... Alright, you know what? Let's save this project. Okay. Save. Oh, there we go. Yeah, this is weird. So for some reason, I don't know if it's 2020 or if people with 18 or 19 are having this problem. When you load in a family, they already have loaded in. Sometimes it's funky and it'll only be changed. So just make sure you save it. If it's still not showing up, close out, reopen it. And if you're still having problems, we will we'll figure it out. But now if we select one of these panels, all of our instance parameters show up in the instance parameter page under the properties. If we go to edit type, our properties parameters are in there. And then we can change our panel offset. Excuse me, just our offset. 1 foot, changes down, maintains the thickness. And if we were to plug this into a script, all we would have to do is plug in the offset parameter and then a range of values for that offset, and it would change all of these. And you could do attractor scripts or orient these guys to the sun or whatever you need to do. All right, so that is covering the basics of families and custom families. A lot more in depth. If you want to go on to Revit City, like I mentioned before, and download one of their families, you can do that. A lot of those are user created, so a little bit more simplified. You can get very complex with the detail you integrate within some of these families, and it just adds another layer to your projects. All right. Our assignment this week will have something to do with these families and editing. I think I might actually just make a video tutorial that goes more in depth on the custom pattern-based families, because there's a much deeper dive into those that we can do. So, and it'll attribute back to our parametric scripting when we get into Dynamo. All right, thanks, and I hope you have a good day or good night. Excuse me.